what are you seeing now in terms of evangelicalism in the West, in
Hmm.
particular, in terms of how we're doing church and communicating the gospel?
Yeah. The new twist that is obvious to everybody is how political the evangelicals have become. When I was young, I mean, we went to a fundamentalist church. It was to the right of evangelicals, but we didn't talk about politics in church. We talked about sin and behavior and
Hippies.
things like that. Yeah, hippies, hair length and jewelry and stuff, smoking and drinking and stuff like that. We wanted to be different than the world. We wanted to be separate, come out from among them and be separate. Uh, The quote
Yeah.
would hear a lot. And we were separate. We were different. And that's not all bad. I look back, I don't have resentment. It saved us from a lot of pain growing up because, our version of being marginal would be go roller skating where people look like they're dancing. Well, that's safer than going to a bar all night,
Right, right, right.
And but we didn't really talk about politics, and it was only it started in I guess the 1970s. Jimmy Carter was elected. He was the year of the evangelical, cover of Newsweek. And then with Francis Schaeffer and Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, much more of a James Dobson, much more of an emphasis on political issues. They were important issues:
Right.
abortion, homosexuality, and then it became almost those were that was the calling card. That was our core belief. Well, actually, it's not our core belief because Jesus didn't talk about either one. Jesus didn't talk about abortion or homosexuality, very important issues, and maybe mentioned elsewhere in the scripture, but Jesus didn't talk about them. So there's got to be something else that we should be communicating. And now, the problem with politics is it's an adversary sport.
Yeah.
So you don't treat your opponents with respect and dignity and love. You try to beat them down. You try to catch them and put them in jail,
Right.
That's the way politics works. And it's really tricky. The church hasn't done very well. You talked about the church in the West, and yeah, you've probably been to Europe, and the Christianity reigned there for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Every village, the biggest church, biggest building is a cathedral church. But you go in them, and there'll be like poor gray-haired people on a
Right.
Sunday morning. What happened? Well, it's not so much that they decided this isn't true anymore. It's what happened in so many places was the church became part of the state, became part of the government. And, Spain would be a great example. The Catholic Church was allied with Francisco Franco, and then he was seen as an oppressive dictator. They overthrew him. So they stopped going to church. They were allies. And that's the danger facing the evangelical church in America, because New York sees us as a voting bloc. We're not. We understand that. But they don't, that politics is their world. And they color us by red and blue, by politics. And once you do ally, once you do make your goal to be close to the centers of power, it's really hard to be the conscience. Martin Luther King used to say, the church is not the master of the state. We don't dominate it. It's not the servant of the state. It's the conscience of the state. And there are some things I'm going to agree with the Republican Party. There are some things I'm going to agree with on the Democratic Party. And I'm going to make my choices not by whether I'm a Republican or a Democrat, but what would Jesus have me to do on this issue? And there's not a lot of room for that in politics. It's a black and white. You're on my side or the other side.
Right.
And Jesus said, well, what do you do with the other side? You love your enemies. Nobody's doing that much in politics. So we have a lot to learn and a lot to show the world.
Yeah.